Okay, brother, we're recording. We left off yesterday with Mom meeting Yoli and telling Yoli that she was...
She was very much in love with Yoli. She took to her right away. And then we got married on December 7th, prior to the marriage. Yoli lived in Brooklyn. So I went to the courts in Brooklyn to see if I could find a judge that would marry us, because the fact that she's Catholic, I was a Jew. We wanted neither a priest or a rabbi. I wasn't going to change, and she wasn't going to change. But no judge in Brooklyn would marry us because of the fact that she was under 21. I had just been 21. This was right after my 21st birthday. And Yoli at that time was 19 and a half. It was a year and a half difference. I went to every judge and couldn't get anybody to marry us. So I finally went to the chief magistrate of the city of New York at 15 Duane Street. His name was Pelham St. George Bissell. A real movie character, because he was like one of the comedic judges in the movie. A short, rotund man with bald hair, bald head, little hair on his side.
I think of Zero Mostel.
No. He was a Zero Mostel, but only about 5'6". In any case, I went to his office and I got to his secretary and I told her the situation. And she asked, "Are we married with the consent of our parents?" I said, "Well, only our her mother and father can agree. They've met me. They like me. I spent the last year in their company, and my mother agrees with it. Both mothers are going to be witnesses at our wedding." So she went and told the judge that. The judge said, "Come back tomorrow at 12 o'clock." The next day we came back with Mom and Yoli's mother. The train whistle. We came back with the two mothers, and we got there about 11:45, 20 to 12. And I presented myself to the judge's clerk. She said, "Wait a minute." She went into the judge. Said, "It'll be ready in a few minutes." He came out at about 10 minutes to 12. He invited us into his chambers, introduced himself to Mom and my mother-in-law and myself. And he spoke to us, and he asked us how long we knew each other and how we felt about the marriage between a Catholic and a Jew. And he says, "More important that we love each other," and so forth. We only agreed. We've been going together for almost a year, at least a year and a half, and we're very, very compatible. Spoke to Mom and my mother-in-law. "What do you think?" My mother-in-law said, "I'm a nice boy." My mother says, "I love her. She's a doll," that kind of stuff. He said, "Okay." He says, "Remember, though, I want this to be a lasting marriage. I have no intention of wasting my time with you two." All right. Oh, he started his speech, which I don't remember. What I do remember, that exactly as he started, the 12 o'clock whistle started to blow someplace in the area. One stopped and another one started immediately. And through the whole ceremony, we heard a 12 o'clock whistle. The ceremony took maybe a minute. And whistles were blowing for that whole minute. When he said, "I now pronounce you man and wife," the whistle stopped.
Okay. Changed seats a little. Where was the first place you lived after you got married? And what were you doing then? What
I was working in Stone Right Studio. That's the funny thing. When we got married just before Christmas, which was a very busy season for us. Now, when I told Jack Green, my boss, I was getting married, he says, "Good." I said, "But I'm going to go away. I'm taking off a week." I was entitled to vacation. I hadn't had a vacation in a long time, but he preferred it in a less busy season. I wasn't exactly indispensable, but I was a very useful guy to have on the job. He says, you leave. Don't come back. You're through." I said, "Up yours." And I left. got married that afternoon, and spent the evening with Yoli's people, the family, the father, mother, so forth. And then we went to Washington, D.C. in a borrowed car on our honeymoon. When I came back, I looked for another job. I didn't go back to Stone Right Studio for maybe 3 years.
What year was this?
1939. We got married December 7th, exactly 2 years before Pearl Harbor. And I went back to Stone Right Studio. A few years later, I had Jill and Judy with me. I loved them. I thought they were such gorgeous children. I wanted to bring them up to the studio and show off my kids to my former fellow workers. When I went in there, somebody told Jack Green I was there. I didn't want to see him because after all he got fired and he told me not to come back to work. When he saw me, he came over me, embraced me, actually kissed me, looked at my kids and told me how beautiful they were. They looked like Yoli. And he liked Yoli when he had met her. He says, "What happened to you? Where'd you go?" I said, "What do you mean, where'd I go?" He says, "Why didn't you come back?" I said, I went looking for you. I couldn't find you. At that time, Mom, time that I got married, Mom moved from 1416 Washington Avenue to East 180th Street. So when they came looking for me, they couldn't find me. I said, "You told me not to come." He says, "I fired you a dozen times. Did it ever matter to you?" Which was true. He had fired me several times. For some reason, I was a married man and I got stupid. I was filled up with my sense of importance, but now I'm married. Nobody can tell me what to do, and I'm not going to go back to him. And I gave up one of the best jobs I ever had as far as enjoying it was concerned. Not that I'd enjoy the job I had for 37 years. When I look back, in retrospect, it was fun a lot of times. There were aggravating times, there were bad times, but that goes with every job. The best job I ever had was a job with Jack Green, because of Jack Green. And I was a real idiot for having left the way I did. If I'd have gone back, he'd have yelled at me and everything else, just like he always did, like a father. And I'd have worked. And he'd have made sure that everything was taken care of. And when he says he was looking for me, I believe him. And anyway, I had a good time. I went back there, and they made a fuss over my beautiful children. But that was it. I already had another job by that time. I don't recall what I was doing. I have no idea. It was during the war.
I remember one time you worked for Todd Shipyard.
I think that was where I was working. It was during the war, and I worked for Todd Shipyard. I was a welder. I was a burner. I was a what they call a burner's helper. That's a guy who walks around with fire extinguishers and fire. Get good money for that too. And I was more or less a gopher for one of the snappers. A snapper in a shipyard is a foreman of one of the departments. I worked for a machinist rigger snapper. Machinist rigger is the guy that lifts the heavy material on a ship. We moved guns, we moved ton pieces of metal, we did everything. I used to do that physically too, but I had to find a way out of that, so I got myself a job as a gopher for this boy, who I became very friendly with. Unfortunately, that son of a gun taught me how to play horses. Till then, I was never interested in horses, but what happened was, I was only about 120 pounds, 125 pounds, and was tall and skinny. And as a joke, he told everybody I was an ex-jockey. So half the shipyard used to call me Jockey, or Jock. He printed on my hard hat, Jock. Everybody called me Jockey, and they thought I was an ex-jockey. So one day we were on a ship on India Street in Greenpoint, and two tinsmiths finished their work early. And this was about 11 o'clock in the morning. They come over to me, "Hey, Jock, we're going to the track. See if you can pick out a couple of horses for us." Now, Ken, this was back in 1942 or 3. I knew nothing about horses. But we turned to the racing page of the Mirror. They had a guy named Fred Keats, used to have all the selections. And he's got the listing of all the races. I guess there were 7 races in those days. And I look, I'm studying it very, very strongly. I pick out Valdina Orphan in the first race, Westwood Bell in the second race. Now, how do I remember those horses? Because those were the horses. This is 40 years ago. The guys come back the next day. Jack, you're a marvel. What happened? Valdina Orphan paid $100. The other one paid $60. We got a $900 or $1,000 doubles. They made a fortune. They made several $1,000s. They give me $100. They took my horse Freddie Zink and I out to eat. They wanted to take us to the track. We couldn't go. We had to finish our work on the ship. But I became very interested in going to the track. And Freddie said, let's go. You're lucky. So the first chance we had, we went to the racetrack, and that was my downfall for several years. I loved it. One of the reasons I loved it was because I was winning the first couple of days I went. Whatever I picked would bring me back money. Of course, it's changed some, and I gave that money back, plus probably $100,000 or $150,000. But I had a good time. I enjoyed it. Curiously enough, in the latter part of my years in New York, because of my job, I was able to go to racetracks 5 or 6 times a week without paying for it. I had a parking space. I had a card that would allow me to go in free, sit in a box and have free parking. So I used to go quite often. I loved the racetrack. I lost most of the time, but I enjoyed, maybe I enjoyed losing. It might have been a status to me. I really enjoyed the racetrack. I could lose $1,000 by this much, by the fact that my horse lost it by that much. I turned to it, wasn't that a great race? I got to run for my money. That's all I wanted. When I won, I was twice as happy. And strangely enough, when I won, I didn't show the enthusiasm that I showed during a race or if I had lost. I remember an incident. I was sitting at Belmont Racetrack up on the top. It was cold. I had a pea coat on. And I was sitting all alone. There was a group up there. They were the guys that worked in the post office, the midnight post office gang. And right from the post office, they used to go to racetrack. A bunch of noisy guys. And I was more of an introvert, believe it or not. And I never wanted to be with these loudmouths because they curse and everything else. And I was sitting by myself up on the top, and I caught the first horse. The horse paid about $24, $26. The horse's name was Radile. I remember Lefty Nickerson was a trainer, and some Puerto Rican rider who was thrown out of racing for drugs. He was riding the first. Eddie Belmonte. He was riding the horse, and it won. Now, I had that horse, and I had another horse in the second race, a first-time starter. So when the first horse won, one of the guys in the post office gang yelled, "Who's alive? Who's alive?" That means who had the winner and who's got a horse in the second race with it. Now, the reason people at the racetrack do that is so they can hedge on bets. In other words, I got one horse that's alive. Another guy might have another horse. A third might have another. So we get together. If I win, I'll give you 10%. I'll give you 10% of whatever I win. If you win, you give me 10%, give him 10%, and so forth. So I said, I got him. He says, oh, good luck. And that's it. Nobody else in the area had it. That's it. The race is off. My horse, by the way, it was a $694 double if my horse wins. I remember all of this, $684. They go around, my horse is running 5th or 6th right behind the pack. When they come to the head of the stretch, my horse pulls out a little room, runs over horses, wins by 6 lengths. So he won so easily, I wasn't excited. I'm sitting there, and I'm watching, I'm saying, how the hell am I going to cash a $684 ticket? You got to show identification. You got to pay income tax on it. I don't want to get this. I don't want to have all that. What am I going to do? And I'm very intent on my thoughts. Suddenly somebody's nudging me on the side. And it's that big mouth from before. Hey, what do you want? He says, want me to cash your ticket? I said, how much? He says, 10% and 10 for me. I said, sure, okay. He disappears. And I'm sitting there with my ticket. I wouldn't give him my ticket. Comes back about 5 minutes later. Here's me $600 bill and like about $15 in change. I said, keep that. Give him the ticket. I kept the $600. I didn't have to worry about Internal Revenue or anything. And that was it. But the guy that was making all... Oh, the worst... Before that happened, the guy in the back said to me, hey, you! I turned around. He said, did you have that? I said, yeah. He said, I don't like this fucking guy. He got a $600 winner, don't even move a muscle. I was embarrassed because there were women there. I used profanity, but at that time, it was unheard of to use profanity in front of women. Now the women use it more than the men, so it's no big deal. But at that time, it was something. That's an interesting thing with the horses. Now, I love the horses. I'm in Florida now 4.5 years. I haven't been to the racetrack 10 times. The last 5 or 6 times I went was because the people that came to visit me insisted upon going to the Florida racetrack. I go, and I enjoy it, but it's lost its meaning for me. I just don't go. And when I tell the people who knew me well that I don't go to racetrack, they don't believe me.
Anyway, we're back in New York.
Yeah.
1940 something or other. When did you start with the transit authority?
Well, I had taken a civil service. I had my choice of two. I had my choice of subways, of being a subway conductor or being a cop. And I went to Mom. I said, Mom, what do you think? Which one should I take? In the police department, I got a lot of connections. My family is politically oriented. My father knew a lot of people who I still knew. I still correspond. In one way or another, I was seeing people that my father knew. I'll bet you money to this very day, if I met somebody that knew my father, they'd say
well, in the meantime,
nice things.
what had happened to Pop?
Papa died. Pop died when I was about 16. I was pretty much on my own. You know, all of us was. Mom supported us with her welfare money and the money she made as a waitress. I worked for Stone Right Studios, 19. I had been an errand boy. I had driven a butcher's truck. I stopped that the first time I went to the abattoir with her. When I saw them slaughtering the cows, I was so sick I couldn't go to work for a week. I didn't eat meat for a year. It was the most terrible thing I ever saw, which I try to block out of my mind because I love my meat. Both ways. But I worked on several jobs. I did a lot of things. I worked for laundry. I worked in Chicago mail order as a shipping clerk. I had a million jobs. I worked 3-4 weeks, a month, whatever. And it was never enough for me. I never found a job I liked until I got to Stone Right Studios. Stone Right I really liked. I think back, and it wasn't a couple of years. I worked about 2 years and I loved it. But what I can't recall. Change this now. Stop it.
How did you get the job with the
oh yeah,
transit?
That's what I can't recall. I was married by this time. I wanted to find a steady job. Steady job is civil service. When I got married, I lost my ambition to become president of the United States. I just wanted to support my family. I had wonderful children. My kids, gee, they brought me more pleasure than anything in the world. My Judy was gorgeous as a baby, with rosy cheeks and blonde hair and always smiling. Jill the same. They were just absolute pleasures. I had all money offered to me for Judy. They wanted to buy the kid. Those big, beautiful, rosy cheeks. She was just a gorgeous child.
What do you mean they offered you money for her?
Different people. You want to sell your kid? Literally. And they meant it. They were serious. We had a teacher that when Judy was going to first grade, her teacher, Miss O'Donnell, I think the name was, I don't know, Judy knew. She wanted to take the child. She offered us money for the child, for Judy. Nuts, yeah. Okay, I admit it had to be crazy. And I thought they were crazy too, and it was ridiculous. There wasn't enough money for them. Maybe now it'd be different. I might take a few bucks. but that was different. I put in for the police department and transit, and I passed both tests. I offered the job. I went to Mom. I said, "Mom, which one should I take?" She said, "Harold, you're no cop. Forget about it. You're not going to chase people with guns." And I realized she was very, very right. I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover. I said, well, I'll take the transit job. It didn't pay as much, but at that time it was security too.
What did it pay at that time?
At that time, I think it was like 59 cents an hour. They offered me the job. I was near the top of the list. Funny thing, when I went to take the physical, I had passed the mental very easily. Out of the 100 questions, I had 2 questions wrong. One of them was how much is 7 and 5, and I put 13. The other one was how much, where is Van Cortlandt Park? I went to school in Van Cortlandt Park, there was Clinton. I put down Manhattan. Don't ask me why. Yeah, I know why. I knew because the end of the subway line, the 7th Avenue line, was in Manhattan. I thought. Actually, it was the Bronx. In any case, I put down, those are the 2 answers I had wrong. Then I had to take the physical. And the day I applied for the physical, I had a very, very bad cold. I went down and I asked them for a postponement. It was at the Flushing Meadows where they had the World's Fair in 1939. I went there and I asked for a postponement because I had such a bad cold. And the guy who I went to, thank God, was very sympathetic. He said, look, fella, he said, this is the last day. We went according to the names. You're W. There will be no more after today. He said, take the test. I got undressed. I got on a scale. I had a minimum of 135 pounds. I weighed 128 pounds. He said, look, he said, you got a cold. You're sick. You must have lost weight, dude. I'm putting down 135. I put down 135. God bless him. I'm sitting here now because of that man. One of the reasons I'm sitting here is because of him. I took the physical, and I wound up with about an 89. Broad jump, the chinning, most of the things were easy. But the one thing that threw me was when we had to do lifts with weights. I could lift right arm fine, I could lift left arm not so fine, you know, the minimum weight at least. So I got passing grades on that. The one thing that threw me was you had to put a weight behind your head. Lying on the floor, some guy was holding my feet, and I had to lift myself up into a sitting position. I'm trying. Well, they didn't know I was trying, obviously. The guy said, lift. I said, what the hell do you think? I couldn't move. I was just paralyzed, laying there with my head.
Do they still have those tests today?
Oh, yeah, they got physical through all civil services. In any case, I still managed to get like an 89 in that. And I had a 98. The wind-up was my overall mark was about 95. And that put me in the top 10%, so I was called pretty quickly. And when they offered me the job, they told me they only had positions open as streetcar motorman. Well, it's very nice. I said, but I want to be a conductor. I said, I'll take the job. I had been advised to do this by somebody that knew about it. He said, I'll take the job, providing you put me down as a conductor. Make me a provisional motorman. I'm working as a motorman, but I want my seniority to start as a conductor. They said, okay, that can be done, and that's what they did. So at about October 10th or whatever, 1944, I started as a streetcar motorman, a provisional streetcar motorman conductor. I worked on that job for about a year. It was a fun job. Nerve-wracking sometimes, but a lot of fun.
What were the streetcars like?
What were the streetcars like? What's a streetcar? And at that time, the motorman, I also collected money. See, it's a funny thing how often my box used to get broken. I used to have to collect by hand. It's amazing. Strange coincidence. Whenever I was broke, that machine broke. I used to go home after having a nice lunch or dinner, whatever the heck it was. I always had a buck or two in my pocket. But I was pretty fair. I gave the transit authority a lot of money, too. And fortunately, very luckily for me, that they called me up to the train before I got caught stealing. Truth is that I don't know anybody who didn't steal. You had to steal to exist. Anybody said that there was a trolley operator that didn't steal is the biggest liar in the world. They have to be. Because there's no such thing. I was honest to an extent. I didn't overdo it. And a lot of times I had the opportunity and I didn't do it because I didn't need it. When the box broke, you had to collect by hand. Who knew how much was being taken in? So you keep $1 or $2 for yourself. At that time, you can get a good meal for $50. And that's how I made a few dollars extra. One day, they called me in and told me if that would be my last night. One afternoon, I came in late. I was working a late trick, starting about 4 or 5 o'clock at night till about 12 or 1 in the morning. They told me that was my last night when I came in to turn in my badge to report to Stillwell Avenue in Coney Island that I was going to be conductor. It was a miserable, drizzly night. It was a Sunday night. And I worked the 5th Avenue line in Brooklyn. That went from Fort Hamilton all the way down to South Ferry in Brooklyn. South Ferry was the end of Atlantic Avenue. Now we go down to 4th Avenue, down to 5th Avenue, all the way down to the end to Atlantic Avenue, make a turn around the Flatbush Avenue extension, and go down Atlantic Avenue to the end. When we get to the end, they had a cross switch. You would get out of your trolley, pull down the front pole, pull up the first pole, and when you went back, the switch would push back. You just switch over the other side and go in the opposite direction. This miserable, drizzly night, I forgot to pull down my front pole. And when I started up, the front pole became entangled with the wires up on top. So I got out of the car, and I'm trying to pull the wires with the cord we had. It wouldn't disengage itself the way I was doing it. So I climbed up on the top of the top of the trolley. We had a little ladder. I climbed up on the top, and I was trying to do it by hand. Suddenly, the wire snapped. The electric wire snapped. I swear by everything I love dearly. The next thing I remember, I was standing on the sidewalk, the opposite side. That would be the north side of the street, I think, which was about 40 feet away from where we were, because that was a six-lane street. I was standing there next to a guy, my follower, the trolley motorman followed me, a guy named Johnny Dunphy, I think, an Irish guy. And I said, "What happened, John?" Because I had blacked out completely. He said, "Harold, if I didn't see it with my own eyes, I would never believe it." I said, "What happened?" He said, "You were up there trying to pull that pole down when the wire snapped."